Good morning, friends. Welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. My name is Avinash Agarwal, and in this video, I will be discussing with you important current affairs for 21st June 2024. Two articles have been selected from the Mint newspaper. These articles are talking A about rural-urban inflation in India, and B analyzing India's economic growth cycle, where we stand, where we are headed, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges. So to give you a sense of the first article that we will be discussing. So in the first article, we will talk about the widening rural-urban inflation in India. We will see how energy consumption patterns, and we will see how post-pandemic migration trends help us in understanding the widening rural-urban inflation in India. What are the implications of having high rural inflation in India? And what are the kind of measures that we can take so that this problem of high rural inflation can be taken care of. Okay, so that's the basic point of discussion around the first article. In the second article, we will be analyzing India's current economic cycle. We will be analyzing its features and policy implications. We will also try to understand the factors which are contributing to the sustained economic expansion that India is witnessing. We have been witnessing reasonably good levels of growth in the last 2 years. So we will be understanding what are the factors behind the same and what are the challenges and risks that we need to be aware of. We need to be able to, keep in mind, strategize for, and try and avoid. What are the strategic measures that we can take so that we can continue on the path of economic stability and accelerated growth. So that is going to be the agenda for the second article. So I hope that this is very clear what we are going to discuss. In the meanwhile, if you all have any doubt while I am discussing, if you all want me to elaborate upon any particular point, then please feel free to comment in the live section, live comments box, live comment section, and I will elaborate. Okay, there was a comment from a user who said that I need to elaborate a little bit more and not just read what is there on the screen. While I'm always very conscious, sometimes I feel that some things which are self-explanatory or something which we have discussed recently, I tend to not elaborate too much upon them, keeping in mind the time constraints. Everybody has only a limited amount of bandwidth, correct? So that, but I'm always willing to help you out wherever required. So please do tell me if there is any doubt. I'll help you all understand. That's my job. So let's start talking about rural-urban inflation gap. Okay. So see, when we are talking about India's inflation data, there are two divides that we need to focus our attention on. First divide is between the overall food inflation and the overall core inflation. Core inflation, as you know, is that we take up the, let us say, the consumer price index combined, right? Or we take up the inflation index, right? And from that we remove all the food articles and all the fuel articles. Okay, food articles and fuel articles, they tend to exhibit a sharp rise in prices, a sharp drop in prices. They are very volatile in nature. Okay, so they can create spikes and dips, and because of that the overall inflation number can keep jumping up and jumping down. Whereas core inflation consists of a basket of goods, let's say basket of goods and services, excluding food and fuel. So whatever remains, so those items kind of behave in a very stable manner. Prices go up, but they go up slowly. Prices go down, but they go down slowly. Okay, so there is a divide, or there is a gap between food inflation, which is high, and core inflation, which is at acceptable levels in India. So that is the first divide that we need to be mindful of. Okay, secondly, there is also this rural urban divide, which I will speak about. But just closing the loop on the first divide, right? Adequate rains, proper monsoon distribution going ahead in the next 2 to 3 months will ensure that our kharif output is strong, will ensure that supply chains are robust, will help in cooling food inflation. And RBI is waiting for that scenario to play itself out. So that is the idea about food and core inflation. Now moving ahead, talking about rural urban inflation gap. Okay, now let us try to put some numbers on this first. You have to understand that based on, let's say, last 3 months track record. So the gap is around 1.3 percentage points between urban inflation and rural inflation. So as a result of which, what is happening is that we are not able to meet our combined inflation or overall inflation's target of 4%. As you may be aware that RBI's monetary policy committee is chasing a target of 4% plus or minus 2% on the combined consumer price index, combined meaning rural and urban combined. Okay. So the idea is that since rural inflation is behaving or is sitting at a level 1.3 percentage points on an average higher than urban inflation, so the overall target is not getting met. Now, why is it that rural inflation is high despite the fact that various indicators suggest that rural demand is weak? So we have to understand that inflation basically is talking about price rise. So which commodities or which groups are exhibiting price rise and why? So price rise can typically happen because of A, either an increase in demand, right? Or B, because there is a shortage of supply, or relatively speaking, the demand is higher than supply, right? That can be the basic reason for price rise. Okay. Now, if you analyze what is happening at the rural level, so the answer, one part of the answer lies in the fuel and light commodity section of fuel and light group of articles. Okay. Now, fuel and light inflation in rural area, it has been 7.5 percentage points above urban inflation. So if you compare fuel and light inflation in urban and rural areas, the gap is 7.5 percentage points. That means that rural inflation is 7.5 percentage high. That's huge. Why? We need to understand that. So the energy consumption pattern is key to understanding this puzzle. Urban households are mostly using electricity and LPG for their energy needs, whereas rural households are relying upon coal, coke, charcoal, firewood, dung cakes for their energy needs, right? And what has happened in this particular category is that inflation has been quite high, quite stubborn. Prices have remained quite high in these categories. Now you may be wondering that does rural India still depend upon these alternative items and doesn't use LPG? The answer is yes, right? So in 2021, less than half of all rural households, this is the kind of data point that is important for you. In 2021, less than half of all rural households had access to LPG compared to over 90% in urban areas. This was a problem, right? That people are using dirty fuel, dirty sources of energy, which causes indoor pollution, which causes a variety of health issues. So therefore government launched a variety of schemes, most important being your Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. Okay, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana was launched, but despite the launch of Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, despite the fact that government is providing 12 LPG cylinders refills at subsidized prices, there aren't very many takers of these LPG cylinders in rural areas. For the very simple reason that prices shot up because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, etc. As a result of which prices shot up, growth kind of weakened over there. There can be other reasons, right? But the growth is not there. LPG cylinder ka pickup or uptake is not there. If you look at data, this is the data which has been provided by the author of the article, that based on RTI query of August 2023, clearly it is shown that households are either not buying any LPG cylinder or they are just taking one refill. That's it, right? So despite the fact that there has been reduction in LPG prices, still the uptake is not there. Maybe it is unaffordable for rural households. Maybe it will still take more time and effort to wean rural households away from these alternative sources. Maybe we need to make the supply chain more robust, more certain, right? Able to reach the last mile of the rural users, right? So any which ways, the idea is that the LPG, the kind of fuel and light that you are using right now, LPG price cuts, they have helped in bringing down inflation in urban areas, but not so much in rural areas, because rural areas are still using other sources, unregulated sources of energy, where prices have been fairly stubborn and high. So that is one part of the explanation. There is another part of the explanation. vegetables, recreation, cereals, etc. are are trending at a higher level. The inflation in these categories trending at a higher level. Why? Maybe because of the expanded rural consumer base. So why has the rural consumer base expanded? Maybe because the large scale urban to rural migration that took place in the pandemic and post pandemic months, that has not fully reversed. So there are more people sitting in rural areas, and therefore the consumption for these particular items is trending to be a little higher, right? And that probably explains to you what's happening. Now, are we sure that this is the right conclusion? So there are some evidences that have been provided in the article that help us in being a little sure of what we are saying. Like for example, there is increased labor supply at farms. So this increased labor supply at farm probably supports this hypothesis that there is an expanded rural consumer base. There is a shortage of unskilled labor in urban centers. This again, supports this hypothesis maybe that rural consumer base has expanded. Okay. Why do you think that this may be happening? Maybe because opportunities are not there in cities, housing is expensive in cities, low-end manufacturing, where most of these people were working, has not yet completely picked up. Okay, so be it your textiles, garments, tobacco, leather, these are the important sectors for this section of our workforce, and these sectors have not yet picked up. There is a free food scheme for poor in rural areas that the government is implementing. So the cost of living A is higher in urban areas, opportunity B are scarce in urban areas. It is easy to survive C in rural areas. Government itself is supporting survival in rural areas. Looking at all of these conditions, looking at all of these statements, it seems that the higher consumer base in rural areas may be driving prices up for these commodities such as vegetables, cereals, etc. in rural areas. There is furthermore evidence that is provided, and that evidence is in the form of railway journeys undertaken. So even up to September 2023, monthly journeys were lower by almost 100 million from 700 million in the pre-pandemic level, right? So that is again a very important data point. You may not be able to cite all these data points. You may not be able to take all these data points with you in the examination. But please understand that anybody who is logically looking for answers is looking at answers in this particular format, where you are analyzing, you are stating your hypothesis, you are putting evidence to support your hypothesis, and you're trying to arrive at a logical conclusion. So even by year ended 31st March 2024, number of railway journeys was 20% lower than the pre-COVID level. Okay, so that's the important again second pillar of our evidence. So you have to understand that a lot of these factors are beyond the influence of RBI. RBI cannot help in reversing the urban rural migration. RBI cannot push clean energy sources, affordable energy sources into rural areas. That is not something that RBI can do. But at the same time, RBI has to make sure that inflation in India remains near 4% plus or minus 2%, both for urban and rural areas. So we have to be very mindful over here, because RBI's tight monetary policy, it can hurt economic growth, and we don't want to let that happen. So for that, proper liquidity management is important. For that, it is very important to discuss and debate whether keeping the policy rates high is going to remedy the situation in rural areas, yes or no. So patience is definitely going to be required, but at the same time, there is going to be a lot more debate around this issue going ahead. So I've given you a fair starting point, a decent starting point of what the problem is, and I hope that you have understood this article. If there is absolutely any question, Swarna Lata, good morning, as well as everybody else. If there is absolutely any question or any part where you feel that I haven't done complete justice in the above article, please comment. I will go back and elaborate upon it. In the meanwhile, I will move ahead to our next article. The next article speaks about India's economic growth cycle, right? So we have exhibited consistent strength. There is growing optimism. Despite the fact that there is a coalition government at the center, the general belief is that the broad policy direction that we will adopt, we will maintain, will be the same as earlier, which is again a initial estimation, it is still very early days in the coalition, but that is the broad sense that a lot of analysts are having, and that there are more years of fast growth, fast expansion for the Indian economy. We are likely to be the third largest economy by 2027. We are likely to be the fastest growing large economy for some more years coming ahead, right? So where exactly do we stand in our growth cycle? Okay, so you have to realize that in the last 5 quarters we have been outperforming our own expectations. We have been performing better than what we were expected to perform. So we are moving higher in the growth cycle at a faster than expected pace, right? These are nice sentences, words, terminologies to have in your vocabulary whenever you are sitting in the interview, hopefully, and you are speaking the way this article is speaking to you. You are going to definitely leave a positive impression upon you, which is what we hope to gain through this particular discussion as well. That a lot of these things which I talk about, which I discuss with you, should be internalized within you, should be a part of you, so that when you are sitting and analyzing what's really happening in the Indian economy with experts across the table, you yourself come across as a reasonably well-read person and aware person. That's the whole idea, right? So we are moving higher at a faster than expected pace. Our recovery is still young, right? It is still young. Why we are saying that our recovery is still young? Because it has been only 2 years from March 2022 since when we have been recovering, right? But the good point is that most high frequency data shows that there is robustness, right? That our manufacturing and services ka PMI readings are strong, our credit growth is strong, our GST collections are strong. These are positive things, right? There are certain negative or there are certain worrisome aspects as well. Like for instance, there is a sluggish trend in consumption. We have discussed about this multiple times over the last 1.5 months, that the growth rate for household consumption in India, which forms the bulk of our aggregate demand, was only 4% in the previous year. So sluggish trend in consumption was already described earlier to you, which is why I want you to watch these sessions in continuity, because if you watch only one session and try to judge and evaluate me, you can do whatever, but I will not be able to meet your expectations. But if you watch 15 to 20 sessions, then you will be able to establish a sync with me, and you will be able to start connecting the dots that I am able to connect. So sluggish trend in consumption is something that we have spoken about, but slow pickup in private capex is something that we have also spoken about quite a bit in our discussions. So the capex cycle of India is being supported by government's push, but how long can the government push? Ultimately, the private sector needs to ramp up, and they may be in the process of ramping up, but that private capex is what we need right now, right? So essentially we are at an early stage expansion cycle right now. That's where we are, and going ahead we need to broaden the base of our economic growth. Going ahead we need to broaden the base of our economic expansion, okay, which is likely to happen because there will be a pickup in rural demand. Consumer products volume growth is being seen in rural areas, so that's a good thing. Private investment will pick up going ahead, right? And that is also being reflected in the order books of engineering companies. So this is likely, both of these trends, the pickup for consumer products in rural areas and the order book of engineering companies, these are strongly positive indicators, and we believe that these indicators will hold going ahead, right? How is this cycle different, right? So you have to realize that in the recent past, the kind of reforms that we have implemented, okay, so those reforms have helped in ensuring supply side responsiveness. They have helped in having some sense of macro stability. Like for instance, our fiscal deficit is consistently coming down. Inflation is within control, although there are some certain issues over there. Our current account deficit is under control, right? So the indicators of macroeconomic stability are very much there in place, and we have integrated with the rest of the world quite well, right? So when it comes to our trade numbers, right, we are not doing all that bad as compared to where we were. So we have been able to fortify the Indian economy and made it a self-sustaining machine. We are obviously going to be impacted by any external shock, but there is an inherent growth momentum within the Indian economy which has been nurtured, which has been sustained. Okay. Again, to put some numbers around this, So see, our capital expenditure is around 34% of GDP in 23-24. Our inflation is below 6% in 7 out of last 9 years. So it's not all that bad. Current account deficit has been at or around or below 2% of GDP. Our export market share for goods and services has risen by 40 basis point to 2.5% since 2019. So these are good things that we have been able to, maintain, or good things that we have been able to achieve, right? What about policy direction, right? Where are we headed? So like I said that momentum should continue in the right direction. We have to focus upon two things: A, create jobs, and B, ensure macroeconomic stability. Creating jobs, as you all are aware, is very, very important, because in India, on a per annum basis, we are adding 9.5 million people in the working age population. And if we are not able to create jobs for them, then we can say tata bye bye to our demographic dividend potential, so on, right? So we need to create jobs. Now, what can we do, or what have we done to create jobs? So see, from a government's point of view, apart from your Manrega and such kind of schemes, government has pushed infrastructure investments. A, that creates job directly, and B, it makes the Indian economy competitive so that our manufacturing base, etc., can become stronger and can therefore create jobs going ahead, right? So that's what we have been doing. Going ahead, we are likely to continue doing that. We'll keep pushing the physical infrastructure so that our domestic competitiveness improves, so that manufacturing base expands, so that jobs can be created, right? From a macro stability point of view, we have favored fiscal prudence and likely to do that going ahead. We have ensured higher capital expenditure from the government side. We are likely to do that. And we are trying to target our welfare spending. We are likely to continue doing that. Of course, like we discussed in, I think, yesterday's discussion, we can improve our targeting. There are sections within our population, particularly scheduled tribe, right? Particularly the bottommost section of the rural population, where we need to do better targeting, where they are the ones who need our assistance, our welfare schemes assistance the most. So we need to do better targeting over there, but we have definitely improved from where we were, let us say, 10-15 years ago, right? So these are the positive steps that we have taken. Going ahead, if we can address the land market reforms, and if we can address the labor market reforms, then that will also be helpful, and it will help in sustaining the growth momentum. What are the risks? Risks emanate from global factors, right? If, let us say, that there is a deterioration in the worldwide growth, or there is pessimism in the external sector, so that will definitely impact the flow of FDIs and FPIs into India, and that will, take a toll upon the exchange rate. There can also be a rise in commodity prices, maybe because of any reason. Like, for instance, you never know which region may fall into turmoil. You never know what kind of a geopolitical scenario may emerge. So there can be a rise in commodity prices, which can be a problem. Okay. If there is, let us say, a lot of focus upon aggressive redistribution in the Western economies, which happens to pull investor confidence down, which happens to pull the growth momentum down, so then that will also have an impact upon India. But the important takeaway, or the bottom line, is that Indian economy is well placed as of now to achieve 6.5% growth rate until 2030 on a per annum basis. We are expected to expand to 8 trillion economy size by 2032 from $3.8 trillion size in 2024. We are well placed to provide around 20% or fifth of global growth momentum over the course of this next decade. So I hope that both these two articles have given you a fair sense of what's happening in the Indian economy from different lenses. Some articles are going to be positive, some articles are going to be a little circumspect. Certain articles will have a cheerleader tone to them, certain articles will have a skeptic's tone to them, and you need to be able to ingest everything that is being shared with you. All these opinions can be right and wrong, can be challenged and supported. You need to be able to understand what's really happening, take a position based on data that is being provided to you. Whatever stand you take, be able to support it through proper evidence, through proper reasoning, through logical analysis, and always try to come to a conclusion which is balanced and having a tilt towards optimism, because ultimately if you become a policymaker, you need to solve for challenges. So you cannot say that, okay, these challenges have not been solved. You need to solve those challenges. So always have that mindset. If there is absolutely any doubt that you all have, please ask. Otherwise, I will be closing this session. Kashish has a comment. This is my first class. Please tell me what topic you teach. So Kashish, typically what I do is that I teach economics, current affairs. What I do is that I rely upon exactly one newspaper, that is Mint. I select 2 to 3 best articles out of that newspaper, which are exam relevant from our point of view, which talks about macro aspects, which talks about, let us say, growth, which talks about inflation, which talks about import, export, fiscal deficit, jobs, unemployment, foreign exchange rate, FPI, FDI, migration, urbanization, which talks about sustainability, which talks about green economy. So I select relevant articles which are relevant for us from an economics current affairs standpoint, right? So as you may be aware that Ecoholics is the largest platform for economics, where we teach you or we help you prepare for Indian Economic Service Examination, economics optional for Indian Administrative Service Examination, for the larger Indian Administrative Service Examination, for the RBI, SEBI, NABARD kind of examinations. So essentially Ecoholics is the largest platform for economics, and we are doing these sessions so that our students, past, present and future, are having a strong grasp of what's happening in the Indian economy. That's what I'm doing. That's what I teach. So I teach 2 to 3 articles. I pick up 2 to 3 articles from the Mint newspaper and I discuss them. That's what I do. Right. So that's about it from my side. Right. I hope that this was relevant. If there is any doubt, even for those who have not been able to participate live, please feel free to share your doubts in the comment section and I will be able to address them either in the comment section itself or maybe in the next session. Thank you so much for being here. We'll meet you tomorrow again. Until then, take care. Bye bye. Jai Hind.